Gloria, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, I think we should go ahead and begin. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for another session during our International Education Week. This afternoon, we have Dr. Lori Rodriguez, who is an Associate Professor for Humanities and Coordinator for the Mexican American Studies Center at Palo Alto College, where she has taught since 2016. Today, Dr. Rodriguez will provide us a virtual tour of the Teotihuacan. Before we begin, I would like to ask everyone to mute themselves, and if you have any questions during the session, please put them on the chat. We'll be answering the questions once the presentation is complete. And one last thing, we will also be having a raffle of an international snack box. So please make sure to stay until the end of the session, as you must be present to win. Thank you for joining us. And now Dr. Rodriguez will begin.
Thank you. Let me. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Very excited about this presentation. Of course, we're not able to visit face-to-face right now, but I'm going to do my best to show you the space virtually. This was part of the summer study abroad for for Mexico. It was Mexico City, Puebla, and Oaxaca. And this area is an archaeological site just northeast of Mexico City. And I was able to visit on a research trip, and it was an amazing experience. And so I'll be able to give you that insight also from the visit that I had. And so to begin with, let's see, let me click forward. So we're gonna talk about the context of Mesoamerica. So Teotihuacan is part of one of the great Mesoamerican civilizations. And Mesoamerica is, for those who don't know, I'm gonna do an overview as part of the course was going to do, very briefly, of course. So it's a historical region and a cultural area in North and Central America, extending from current day Central Mexico to just northern Costa Rica. And this is where the pre-Columbian societies flourished before the Spanish colonization of the Americas, which was in the 15th and 14th centuries. And I'll show you a map. And so here we see this map of Mesoamerica, and you see here in the brown, right, the darker brown, these are the approximate limits of high Mesoamerican culture. So you can see here, right, present day where the countries are currently, it goes all the way down to see Costa Rica, and then you see right there, Mexico, central and southern Mexico. And these were all civilizations that were at their height in different times. So you didn't have all of them at the height of their civilization at the same time, right? As with a lot of empires in a region, usually one empire will, be in control of that region, right? And so you can see where they are, but I'll show you now the timeline that I find helpful. So you see the oldest of the Mesoamerican civilizations is considered the Olmec, and it has the area where they existed. So you have them in the Gulf Coast, and then you have the next one, the Zapotec. And I know that the lines seem pretty close together, but if you look at the times, I mean, you're looking at 1500 BC, right? That's a really, really long time ago. And then you have 500 BC, right? So that's 1,000 years difference. And then you have the Zapotec that are at the height of their civilization, and that's in the Valley of Oaxaca. That was another part of the experience, was the Zapotec ruins in Monte Alban and Mitla in Oaxaca. And then you have the next, or the Maya, start coming into the height of their civilization. And this is right at the cusp of what we call the before current era and the current era, or BC and AD. Teotihuacan is right there at the same kind of timeline. So it's dated that Teotihuacan began its civilization right there at the cusp of just about maybe 180. which is a very long time ago. And then you have after that, right, the other civilizations. You have the Toltec, Mixtec, and then you have the Aztec. And you see that the Aztec were around, it's dated around 1300, 1200, 1300 that they start, they begin to create their civilization, their empire. And they're the ones that actually discovered Teotihuacan and named it Teotihuacan, because we don't know a lot about the actual inhabitants or the people who founded Teotihuacan, which is a really great mystery, and which is pretty exciting because people right now are excavating and they're finding new things daily. And so just want to give you a little timeline so you can kind of see where these civilizations were and where they were as far as the timelines in relation to each other. Okay. And so again, just to now contextualize it, you now see right here, Teotihuacan, right here, right? You have right here, and then you have Mexico City very close by here, right? And so you can see the proximity is very close. And then of course you have all these other, and it's important to kind of hold these different civilizations in your mind, because you did have Maya, you had different groups that were populations that were from what's currently Guatemala, but this is the Mayan civilization. You had the area of Veracruz, you had areas of this area here, Oaxaca, where people actually, it's found that their cultural influences were all found in Teotihuacan, which shows the extent of the influence of this region, where it was a huge metropolis and cultural hub, which we'll get into in a few minutes. And so this is an overview. I'm going to go over some main information, which I think helps stick to benefit the actual virtual experience. So because we're going to kind of just do a walkthrough, and there's some short videos we'll see by the different archaeologists and researchers that that will provide a little bit of insight on the different specific areas that we'll go into. But I want to give an overview first so that we can understand more about Teotihuacan. So I'm going to share another video here with you. Okay, so I'm hoping y'all can hear this.
No, there's no audio.
Okay.
When you do the share screen, you have to click on share audio as well.
Yeah. Okay. Oh.
The Aztecs believed that it was a sacred place where the sun and moon was created, and they named the site
That's good.
Teotihuacan, which means the place of gods and the underworld meet.
Okay, let's see. So I did do it earlier and it was working. So let's see if it's working now. Okay. Okay. Let's see. I think maybe because of my headphones, possibly. Let's see. Oh. Okay, I'm going to try it again, see if you can hear it this time.
The city of gods, the pre-Hispanic city of
Yes, I can hear
Teotihuacan.
it.
Okay, good.
The
Great.
history of Teotihuacan is believed to go back to the 2nd century BC. It developed into a large city and a center of ancient Mexican culture. However, it was abandoned during the middle of the 7th century. The ruins were later found by Aztec people advancing onto the Mexican Central Plain during the 14th century. The Aztecs believed that it was a sacred place where the sun and moon was created, and they named the site Teotihuacan, which means the place of gods. This temple and shrine Quetzalcoatl, the most important god in Central America. Quetzalcoatl means the feathered serpent. Its shape resembles the flow of a meandering river. Quetzalcoatl was worshipped as the god of life and rich harvest. This temple also enshrines the main god of Teotihuacan. It is Tlaloc, the god of water. Tlaloc has large eyes, jaguar-like tusks, and rules the underworld. Tlaloc, the god of the underworld, resides in a place deep underground where the water from heaven and the underworld meet. It is here that Tlaloc regenerates life. It was believed that the underworld, earth, and heaven were connected and constantly rotating. Sacrifices of living human hearts were made to provide the sinking sun in the west with enough power to rise again in the east. The Aztec people believed that this abandoned giant pyramid was where the gods created the sun and named it the Pyramid of the Sun. The sun was the center of Aztec worship. People in recent years have started to flock to Teotihuacan on the day of the spring equinox. It's the day when the sun passes right above the pyramid at noon. People hold their hands up and open their palms towards the sun. The ancient people's awe to the power and blessing of the sun is vividly recreated here.
Okay. Oh gosh. Let's end this. Okay, so let me go back to my, it's gonna be a little bit of switching. Okay. All right. Okay, can everybody see that and hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's gonna be a little switching back and forth. Not too much switching, but we'll be switching. So you see that from the very brief overview, we're gonna have another video and then we're gonna go into the tour. But what I'll touch on a little bit more is the this idea of the heavens and the earth and the underworld all being interrelated, which is a very Mesoamerican way of thinking. You have, if anybody's had any experience in learning about, right, the calendars, right? You have the Aztec calendar, which is circular, right? It's not linear, it's circular. So it's in cycles, which is a very, very different non-Western worldview. When we talk about Western, we talk about Western European, generally, when we talk about Western, right? It's a very different worldview from the non-Western worldview, right? You have like Eastern philosophies that have very similar views, right, of life and death as being circular, right, as death being part of life. We have like Dia de los Muertos, which comes from Mesoamerican religious beliefs, right, that there's a lot of circular ideology, right? So that's going to play into what we find in Teotihuacan and what researchers are finding. And so this archaeological site is located approximately 30 miles northeast of Mexico City. So you take a bus ride from Mexico City. Generally, if you're staying in Mexico City, there's not a lot, you know, as far as, you know, city around Teotihuacan to stay. It's a very small town, very beautiful ride into the ruins. But generally, people will stay in Mexico City and then take a day trip to Teotihuacan. The civilization is estimated to have existed from the 100s to 700s AD. And it's estimated to have a population of between 100,000 and 200,000. And so imagine this space here, as we take the tour, being populated by approximately, right, up to 200,000 people, right? It's a very big civilization. The interesting thing about Teotihuacan, as popular as it is, as far as you know, an important historical site, is that the origins, the history, and the culture of the people remain a mystery, which is very fascinating. And I'm sure the archaeologists and researchers are very excited to learn all the new things that they're discovering, right? Like I said, very recently, some new discoveries were found that we'll talk about. It was named City of Gods by the Aztecs, or the Mexica, which is what they called themselves, but later on they became known as the Aztecs by the Europeans who came and made contact with them. And it was around the 1300s to early 1400s that they discovered this space and started to occupy it themselves. So they called it City of Gods. They named it Teotihuacan, which was, it's a name that's imposed. That's not what they called themselves. So we still don't know who actually founded and, gave rise to this space. It's believed to be, by the Aztecs, it was believed to be the birthplace of the universe in the current era, which is the fifth sun, the quinto sol. As I said, the philosophy of Mesoamericans is in cycles, right? So in suns, right, cycles, which is circular, and this is considered the fifth sun that we're in. You have 3 large pyramids, the Pyramid of the Sun. This is the largest pyramid in central Mexico. Then you have the Pyramid of the Moon, which is the next largest, and then the Pyramid of Feathered Serpent, or Quetzalcoatl is the feathered serpent. And it's designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So it's being preserved as much as possible and being excavated very carefully. And here you have that in the photo is the Pyramid of the Sun, you can see. And it kind of mirrors, it's pointed out that it mirrors the mountain behind it, right, a little bit. And some more information. And so it's approximately 8 square miles, right? So it's a pretty big space. It's estimated larger than the Roman Empire, right? As far as the central space. And it contains around 2,000 apartment compounds, as well as various pyramids, plazas, temples, and palaces for the priests and nobles. So it was a very large metropolis, as you can see, right? Very similar to how we'd see, a big city today, right? With all the different various levels of society, right? It was a large, wealthy trade metropolis, specifically for obsidian tools. Obsidian, there was an obsidian mine close by, and obsidian is a very hard material that was used for spears and things like that, arrows. So it was a very, very significant material at that time. Ceramics is also pottery. It was known for its creation of very beautiful pottery and ceramics. Cotton, textiles, shells, exotic feathers, such as the quetzal bird. We'll talk a little bit about that. Cacao, which, if nobody knows, right, we have the cacao was founded here in the Americas, in Mesoamerica. So who didn't have cacao, wouldn't have coffee. So it's a very important find, I think. And of course, many other foods. It was a cosmopolitan and pluralistic city, which means that it was inhabited by not just one ethnic group or one populace. It had many different populations that lived there, including the Maya, the Mixtec, and the Zapotec, which existed in very, very far away regions. And so it's very interesting that you have these different populations that live there. And it's said that they had their different areas in the city that they lived. And it's structured in quadrants, which are of astronomical significance, so 4 corners. And it's believed, a theory is that it was governed by 4 separate councils or governing bodies: the jaguar, coyote, bird of prey, and feathered serpent. And that's one belief. And then we'll talk a little bit about what happens with the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, which indicates that there probably was some kind of political conflict with the ruling class that's associated with the feathered serpent. It's been compared to other ancient cities, including Rome, Alexandria of Egypt, and Chang'an of China. So it's a pretty significant historical site. A little bit more, as far as the architecture, the pyramids, in contrast to pyramids that we find in Egypt, for example, these pyramids were in what's considered a talud tablero style. And you can see on the right in this presentation, the talud is the slant, like the slope, and the tablero is the step. So it's created the pyramids that you see here generally of that style. And there were temples that existed on top of the pyramids. Of course, you know, the many years that have passed, a lot of the materials have deteriorated or were destroyed. But you did have temples that were on top of the pyramids that don't exist anymore. You also had murals and sculptures found throughout the city, and a lot of these are housed in the museum in the actual space, but a lot of them are also in the museum in Mexico City, the Anthropology Museum in Mexico City, which has many, many of these Mesoamerican ruins in there. It's an amazing museum. And you have some significant deities that are highlighted in this space. You have Quetzalcoatl, which is feathered serpent, Tlaloc, the rain god, and a goddess known as Great Goddess. And so we know a little bit less about Great Goddess, although there's some different research that shows that she evolved into different goddesses in Mesoamerica, such as with the Aztecs. And so you have the Pyramid of Quetzalcoatl, which is the most elaborately decorated of all the pyramids. And it's also found that it contained over 200 human sacrifices buried in there under the temple. And so that tells us that it was a very significant space, right? As far as, you know, the sacrifices, usually it's for either deity, right? They're still trying to figure out what those human sacrifices were actually for. And there's a lot of new, like I said, there's excavating and finding new details every day. The art and architecture styles of Teotihuacan are found widely throughout Mesoamerica, suggesting the far-reaching influence that Teotihuacan had on other civilizations since they have taken it back, right, to different regions. In around 600 AD, the Pyramid of Quetzalcoatl was desecrated, indicating that there was probably some kind of uprising against this sector of governance. Again, like I said, that's a theory, but it was very deliberately desecrated. So that tells us that there was something intentional in the destruction of that temple. And recent discoveries of tunnels provide much potential knowledge for the inhabitants and rulers' beliefs and rituals of the inhabitants of Teotihuacan. The first discovery was a tunnel underneath the Pyramid of the Sun. And they've discovered that it wasn't a burial site. Some people thought maybe, you know, it was a burial site, but it's not. There were intentional tunnels that were created under there. And because of their belief in the underworld, the significance of the underworld as part of our existence on Earth and then in the heavens, the underworld and the tunnels are a very significant part of their religious beliefs. So it's believed that these tunnels are actually part of some kind of ceremonial or ritual or religious belief. They found another recent find is the tunnel below let's see if I can show you the map. Here we go. So you have the Pyramid of the Sun where they found the first tunnel, and the way they found that is a little dog apparently ran in there and they found out there was a tunnel. That's the story that's told. They didn't know there was a tunnel under there. And they started excavating. They found, yeah, there was a big tunnel system under there. And then they found one more recently under the Temple of Quetzalcoatl that runs to the Ciudadela, which is very close. And the Ciudadela is the space that was regarded for its religious, right, as a very important space for religious and ceremonial activities. And so the fact that there's a tunnel running underneath that temple to space is very significant, and they're still excavating that. And then very recently, in May of this year, they found another tunnel under the Pyramid of the Moon, which they're also hypothesizing that, and it runs to the Plaza of the Moon, from the pyramid to the plaza. And so you can see there from the Pyramid of the Moon to the plaza that there is probably some significant religious component there, right, with relation to the underworld, right? So it's very, very fascinating, all of the research that they're finding, but also what's not known, right? So obviously, you know, this is a really significant space for, you know, how large the, you know, the civilization was, but we still don't know very much about the space. And so I'm going to show another clip that gives a little bit of an aerial spatial view in the video. This presentation, there are two researchers that are going to explain a little bit, very briefly, about Teotihuacan, and then we can go into the virtual tour and we can walk around virtually so we can see the space. And then afterwards, we'll have time for a little bit more discussion, elaboration, and questions if you all have. So if you have any questions, you can start putting them in the chat so you don't forget them later. So let me see if I can get this to open up.
We're standing in the archaeological park of the ancient site of Teotihuacan. We're about 25 miles northwest.
All right, so making sure y'all can hear. Can you hear it?
We're standing in the
Yes, you
archaeological
can hear.
park of the
Thank you.
ancient site of Teotihuacan. We're about 25 miles northwest of Mexico City. The site of Teotihuacan is known as the City of the Gods, the name given to it by the much later Aztecs. They look back at what was then in ruins, but thought of it as a sacred city. Sometime around the year 100 BCE, you have the beginnings of Teotihuacan. And then sometime between around 600, 700 of the Common Era, things start to go awry here. And so when the Aztecs are making pilgrimages to this site much later from their capital city of Tenochtitlan, or Mexico City, they were amazed and impressed. They believed that this was the city where the gods lived, where the fifth sun was created. And they named this place, and they named the streets, and they named the buildings, but we don't know the original names. So this long avenue was named by the Aztecs as the Avenue of the Dead. Teotihuacan is a great mystery in many ways. We don't know what language they spoke. We don't know what they called themselves. We don't have a written language that we know of. And even though we do know a lot about the city and the population of Teotihuacan, some of the basic foundational knowledge is lost to us, temporarily, hopefully. So from what we found, from the art, from the archaeology, from the buildings, we can say that they were masters of city planning, that they built these fabulous temples. But we don't see ruler portraits like we might see in Olmec culture that's a little bit earlier. What we find here at Teotihuacan are these clear centralized government, whether a single ruler or a body of rulers, it's unclear to us. But whoever was in control had enough power to organize labor to plan on this massive scale, and everything is so standardized. The city itself is very centralized, and it's planned on this grid plan. There was no precedent for this type of highly organized, centralized city. And so there must have been enough food that was grown and brought into the city. We're talking about a highly organized, hierarchical culture that could pull off monumental architecture over a period of hundreds of years. And the fact that we don't have this cult of personality, that we don't have clear portraits, is kind of amazing. It's frustrating to us today because we want to read into these beautifully complex murals that you find all over the city. We want to see rulers. We want to see narratives that talk about the ideologies that are being conveyed to the population through a ruler or rulers. But what we see in these murals instead are the main deities, some kind of storm god, some type of great goddess, animal figures like coyotes and jaguars and warriors. And we see a relationship between the monumental architecture and the landscape around it, because as we look toward the Pyramid of the Moon, the shape of it is echoed by the mountain behind it. Teotihuacanos, as we call them, we don't know what they called themselves, were clearly planning some of their structures in accordance with the natural environment to almost create sacred landscape within the city itself. So as we stand here and look out, we see three main pyramids. We have the Temple of the Moon at the far end of the Street of the Dead, the Pyramid of the Sun a little bit further down to the side, and then the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent much further down the Street of the Dead. And the Street of the Dead ran 4 miles, so it's quite long, and it really must have felt like a real procession way toward this sacred building. If we're on the Street of the Dead, it's about 135 feet wide. And so you get this sense that you're processing down this grand boulevard. It's very impressive to be walking through this city. It makes the approach to it formal and processional and
ritualized. And when we look at the Pyramid of the Moon, it would have originally been even taller, with probably wood structures on top.
And we also have to imagine that all of these buildings would have been stuccoed and then brightly painted, so the city would have been extremely vibrant. Off the Street of the Dead, there are approximately 2,000 apartment complexes on this grid plan. A lot of the ones close to the Street of the Dead are more complex. We think that they were more elites, and they too are heavily decorated with things like mural painting.
So we have to imagine something that looks entirely different than the ruins that we see today.
We also have to imagine all the activities here, whether they're ritual or merchants. So only a small portion of the site has been excavated. There are continuing excavations here. Archaeologists are finding amazing things on a regular basis, including a recent discovery of a tunnel under the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent.
We could know so much more than we know now. I hope we do.
All right. Okay. So I think that was a good video to give us kind of this overview.
2020 was different, to say the least. We had virtual dance parties and ordered takeout fees. But before we give 2020 last looks, hold on to those memories with photo books. Find the good and let it fly at shutterfly.com.
Okay. Sorry, I was getting out of YouTube. I was getting these ads that I was trying to get out of. Okay, so let's get back in here. Thanks for being patient with my jumping back and forth. Okay, so we're back to the presentation. Okay, so that gave you an overview, right? And kind of reiterated how fascinating this space is, right? How much we don't know. Luckily, there were a lot of things that were created in stone, right? You know, if you have things that are on paper, things that deteriorate, even wood, right? It deteriorates, but the stone is what lasts, right? So luckily, also the murals a lot of murals were intact, right? The sculpting was intact, so we know some things, but we don't know anything specific about the inhabitants. So as they said, we know of their deities, we know of some of the belief systems, right? We don't know specific people. We don't have, in these murals, interestingly, we don't have specific rulers that are identified with names, right? Usually you'll have some indication of who lived there or who the governing individuals were, but we don't have that here, which is really interesting, but also, you know, we want to know who these people were, right? So they're still trying to figure it out. And they're excavating in the pyramid of Quetzalcoatl. They're excavating and they're finding that there might be an indication that there is somebody, a significant, at least one significant person that's buried there. Because as they're excavating closer and closer, they're finding offerings that become more and more valuable, that only, you know, royalty or very high nobility would be able to afford, right? And so they're still excavating. So it's you know, this fascinating thing. So we're going to go into the virtual tour. There's no way in this virtual tour, unfortunately, I found out to click back home. So I have to go back and then just click in again. So you have to bear with me with a little bit of clicking around, but we'll go ahead and jump in. Okay, let's see. That's not letting me open it when it did before. Okay, let me just stop really quick and get the link. Everybody here? Everybody here in Teotihuacan with me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So imagine being here in this space, which I was along with Maria Rivera, who's, I don't know if she's still on here, but we were on this trip, and it was pretty surreal, right? To see it, it's one thing to see it, and it's another thing to, stop that music a little bit. As nice as it is, I'm gonna stop it. To actually be here physically, right? And so this kind of gives us an idea what it's like to be here. So right now what we're on is the platform on the Pyramid of the Moon. And so we're north. So Pyramid of the Moon, if you remember the map, it's a little off, but it's facing north, right? And so we'll let it span around. And then, I mean, it's an amazing view, right, of the mountain regions around Mexico. It's really amazing. So you can have a seat here and just kind of take it all in. Again, there's the tablero platform style we talked about, right, where it steps. And so from the Temple of the Moon, now we're facing due south, and this is the Temple of the Moon altar. So this is you can see it's a sacred ceremonial site if you have an altar, right? We can stand here on the altar. So we can see what it's like from the altar, and then we can turn around and look back at the Pyramid of the Moon, right? Right there. Let's see. So it's very, very systematic the way it was laid out. Nothing was kind of just put here and there. It was a very, very, architecturally, it was very planned out. And I noticed, I glanced in the chat that, I know someone said it's amazing that you have these architectural, right, wonders and engineering wonders. But that's from, many, many years of studying, right? Even though today we consider modern science advanced, they had their own science that followed, astronomy, sorry, astronomy. So they were very, very scientific in following the movement of the stars and the sun, which it said that their calendar is more accurate than the current Gregorian calendar that we use. That's why we have to do the fall back and spring forward still, because it's still a little bit, right, not precise, whereas they had a very, very precise solar calendar, right? And so you have these other temples around. And then if we go this way, you can go down the avenue. They call it the Avenue of the Dead. That's what the Aztecs called it. And so we went a little far. Let's go to the Pyramid of the Sun. Let's go back. Let's see if we can go back. No, I went too far. I'm going to go to the Pyramid of the Sun. So I'm going to click back. This is the part where I'm going to have to kind of click out and click in. That. And then we'll go to the Pyramid of the Sun. So here's the Pyramid of the Sun. There's some orange tape around here, which, visually it's not appealing, but that's because of the excavation. They have to tape things off for visitors. So you have to understand they're excavating and also allowing visitors at the same time. So I'm sure that gets a little difficult. But you have here, right in front, you have the other, the base, but it's similar to the Pyramid of the Moon. You see it like an altar, right? So you have the pyramid, you have the altar, so it's a very ceremonial space, right? So we'll come up to the base here, and you'll enter, it's railed off here, so you enter from the sides. The steps start on the side, right over here. You come over here, and you climb up, and very steep little stairs, I'll say that. It's a pretty high climb. But if you kind of just keep your head down, and they say that the advice that I was given is to zigzag on the steps, and it'll be easier, and you'll go up more easily and safely. So that's what I did, and I made it up. So then you have the lower level. A lot of people will go up to a certain point and then take a little break, right? And they'll look down and then keep going. Right, so you see people, you go up on the right, come down on the right, on the way down. And then you're in the middle, right? There's a lower level, middle level, And then you keep going. And you want to get to the top, right? So don't look down. And so here, you can see from the top. Of course, you have the tarps because they were actually excavating. This man here, we're going to see a video from him. He's an archaeologist, and he's one of the people that's researching this space. And so you can see the view here is pretty amazing. You can see all the mountains. You can see all the other temples. Of course, it's the highest pyramid, so this is one of the main attractions, is climbing to the top of the Pyramid of the Sun. There you have Mexico City that way. Or actually, yeah, it's gonna be that way. Mexico City will be that way. And so if you look that way, you can see the Temple of the Moons, and you see the other temples. You see from here. And then you see the plaza down there, and there's a little video here of, I wanted to show you that. I think it was available here. So a new discovery here. I wanted to show you all this to show that while he was giving the tour, he was able to, there was a new discovery that was found, and he was very excited about it. And I'll show you this here because it's happening pretty frequently that they're finding things. Let's see if you can hear it. Or if I have to do a separate share.
This is a large greenstone stela that Alejandro Solaria found on the top of the Sun Pyramid, inside of the looted pit.
So he has a thick Japanese accent.
This is a large greenstone stela that Alejandro Solaria found on the top of the Sun Pyramid, inside of the looted pit. And this discovery changed a lot the view and the symbolism and the function of the pyramid itself. It's a very important discovery here. We need to analyze, we need to see the detail of the stela, but the stone, the blood from the possibly the Guerrero Puebla, and very far from here, to bring here to put on the top of the Sun Pyramid. It's very important to know their meanings. We also found the, how do you say, the bracero, the large, the stone, I don't know the English word, bracero, but to burn the ritual burning on the top of the Sun Pyramid. So something to do with the fire. The Sun Pyramid has to do with fire, symbolism of the fire. And the sun, possibly the green stone, is very visible on the top. I think it's standing on the top of the Sun Pyramid, that people outside the Sun Pyramid complex can see, and bright green stones. So it was hard work to take them down. And you can imagine how difficult to get the stones to the top of the Sun Pyramid.
Sorry. So there was a new discovery that he was very excited about. I'm sorry, I had some coffee and kind of coughing on it. So it was a statue that was found at the top with an incense burner, which is very significant, right? So it's some kind of religious offering, possibly. So he says with every new discovery, it kind of changes, you know, what their hypotheses are about what the spaces were used for sometimes, right? So you can see that the, you know, archaeologists are very, very important in finding out, you know, more about this space. Excuse me. Okay, so let's move on. We're gonna go now, excuse me, to the pyramid of Quetzalcoatl, which is, I had shared before, is the most ornate of all of them. Let's see, let me go back and jump back in. Very interesting, because Quetzalcoatl is a very, very significant deity in Aztec, which was the last of the great Mesoamerican civilizations, was the Aztec before the conquest by the Spaniards. And so we know a little bit more, of course, not too much, right? A lot was destroyed intentionally by the Spaniards, unfortunately, including most codices, right, which are their written religious books. But we do know about some of their deities, and definitely Quetzalcoatl was a significant deity for the Aztecs, and Quetzalcoatl is also very significant here. And so we'll go to the this Quetzal is a very beautiful bird in the found in the Mesoamerican region, known for its beautiful feathers. I'll show you that afterwards. And Quat means snake, so it's a feathered serpent, right? Quetzalcoatl. The TL is usually silent in Nahuatl, which is a language that the Aztecs spoke. So you hear the Quat. Some people say Quatl, right? But it's generally Quat, Quetzalcoatl. So here you have the courtyard here. That's right in front of the feathered serpent pyramid. And it's the Ciudadela, which was the significant religious space, ceremonial space, right? And so we can come down here, see a close up. Oh, it's a video close up. Let's just jump down here, actually. We can just jump right down because we're virtual. We can just jump over rails, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So here is so you can see it's a very, very, different archaeological structure. And you can see it was very significant, obviously, for all the time and effort that went into the carvings, right? And so we can zoom in and see. It's said there are kind of different beliefs, but this is said, generally people consider this to be Tlaloc, the rain god.
Yep.
And then this is Quetzalcoatl. And you can see this, right? This is the serpent head, and this is the feathers around him, right? And you can see the snake here. These are the rattles. So this is the end of the snake here. And so you can see here that there's a short video that is, and you all can, come back here and watch all the videos if you like. I encourage you to. But one of the scientists, the archaeologist, said that you see here that this is the feathered serpent here, and the body runs along here and continues here. So the head actually runs down into the front of the steps, and the body runs this way because the end of it is the rattle, right? And then you have it running again right over here. So it's a very fascinating facade, right? And then you have also a lot of shells, which it's said to represent Quetzalcoatl is swimming in the underworld because it's, swimming in water, right? And again, the tunnels now that they're finding, there's water running under them, and they're considering that to be sacred water of the underworld, right? So it's all kind of coming together little by little, right? And then you have the left view, which is similar. And all this is, it's been kept intact. You have replicas in the National Anthropology Museum in Mexico City, which are amazing. So they're replicas, but they're basically what they believe they look like, if they're in their original state, which is a really fascinating experience, right? So you have Quetzalcoatl here, and you have his long body running down here, right? So Quetzalcoatl obviously is a very, very significant deity. And he represents a lot of different things, right? So that he's a life giver, but also that he represents the feather is the air or the heavens, and the serpent is the underworld, right? So he's this merging of the two concepts and this kind of heightened sense of awareness and being, right? So it's a very And it's also kind of contradictory, right? A feathered serpent, right? These contradictions living together, right? In one deity is pretty fascinating. So that's that. And then let's see if we can jump back out. Let's see. Let's see how much time we have. We have time to jump in here. Oh, we're almost out of time, actually. Okay, so let's go back to the platform. And I wanted to show you the living quarters. I think if we go, let me go back out. I'll just do one more quick view of where they lived, and also there's some murals in those spaces, the Tetlita apartment compound. And so here you have some living quarters with murals, right? And of course, as I had mentioned before in the videos, what they mentioned is that there are different levels of luxury living, right? So you had some people that were common people that would live in apartments. You have people that were, of course, if you're higher, in the social order, you had probably more, right? Luxurious quarters, right? So you have here an example of the living spaces. One of the living spaces here. And there's some images of pottery here, right? And so I'll just end with that, since I wanted to have some time for, I guess let me do inside really quickly. And so you see here, right, you still have these murals that are intact. And it said that they had doors, but no windows. That there could have been water, a water system, or they had water here. Right. And of course, there are a lot of murals that are also, you can still see, but since we don't have too much time, you can look for them on your own. So I guess with that, we can have a discussion or the Q&A. Let me go back. I have some other information here, but of course, we're out of time. We won't have the time, but very, very briefly, here is the Quetzal bird. And there's a link here, and you can Google it yourself. We don't have time. You stand in front of the pyramids, and our tour guide showed us this, and there's a video here of another tour guide doing it with a group of people. The amazing part of the architecture is that there's so many components to it. It's fascinating. If you clap in front of a pyramid, it doesn't just make an echo sound. It sounds like the sound of the Quetzal bird, and that's how highly regarded this beautiful bird was. And also the feathers. It is a gorgeous bird. It's beautiful. Look how beautiful this bird is. Look at its beautiful tail feathers. And these tail feathers are what were used in a lot of the royalties' regalia. And so here, this is a recreation of the Aztec ruler Montezuma II, who was the last emperor. He's the one that came into contact with Cortez at the fall of the Aztec Empire. And this is his headdress. It had to be, part of it is recreated. It's actually in Vienna. During the conquest, the Spanish conquest, it was actually taken back to Europe. And actually Mexico, the president of Mexico was asking for it back. But they're saying, it's too delicate. We can't let you take it back. So this is obviously, really significant historical piece, right? So you can see this is, this beautiful headdress. So the Quetzal, right, and Quetzalcoatl, you can see is a very significant part of Mesoamerican religion. So at this point, if anybody has any questions, I can try to answer them. Again, I'll do my best, but I'm definitely not an expert a historian, but I'll do my best to answer questions anybody has or just has discussion items. I think, is Alicia, are you going to moderate the Q&A, or do I just go through the?
Sure, I can go ahead and do that. So it looks
Okay,
like
thank you.
A lot of our questions here are really great comments about the presentation. So it looks like the first one that I'm seeing here is the reason much of the history was lost because the Spaniards burned all of the records when they were converting them to Christianity?
No, not for Teotihuacan, because Teotihuacan, if you saw, it declined. It fell into decline in the 700s, and Europeans didn't come to the Americas until the 1400s at earliest, right? 1500s, or what, earlier, right? But in Mesoamerica, right, you didn't have any contact until much later, so that's not why. For this specific civilization. For the Aztecs, yes, right? Because they were, right, conquered by the Spaniards. But for Teotihuacan, no, which is fascinating, right? We don't know what happened to them.
And Norma says earlier, it is just amazing at how these human beings were so smart and intellectual in building these pyramids without any education or engineering titles, yet these pyramids are still standing and have survived Mother Nature's wrath. Do we know what guided them to create such a beautiful architectural city?
We still don't, unfortunately. You know, as with a lot of other Mesoamerican civilizations, we don't have a lot of information because of just, you know, the time period, and because a lot of things like codices were lost.
No. What's up? Came to bring you a water. Oh, thank you.
Oh. But what we do know is from what does remain and what stands the test of time, right? So we don't know, unfortunately, just based on all we have is what we can excavate, right? Or not we, but what archaeologists can excavate, and what, you know, we can know from the structures, and of course putting it into context with other Mesoamerican civilizations to kind of see similarities and maybe influences, right? But other than that, it's difficult to piece together from so long ago also, right? You have from 100, right? Current era, right? So you have a lot of time that's passed that, and then you have another civilization that kind of, right, came and started to occupy it after that, right? You had the visits from the Aztecs, and so there's also that, right? The influences that they may have had on the space, and, you know, just kind of imposing the naming, right? But yeah, unfortunately, that's one of the great mysteries that we don't know a lot. As of right now, they don't know, but luckily they're finding more in their excavations.
That's so interesting because of how they're able to get those acoustics right. How you said that your tour guide made you clap at a certain angle and point. That's so interesting.
Yeah, it is. And like I said, you can look it up. You know, it just makes this like interesting sound. And then if there's a group of people in the tour, they all clap, and you can hear it sounds like a bunch of birds that are singing, like chirping, making the Quetzal sound. So it's fascinating. I mean, it's, you know, as much as I've researched, and I'm sure as much as, you know, people who specialize in these civilizations have researched, there's so much that we just can't understand, right? From our, you know, minimal Western knowledge, right? So it takes a lot of, well, at least for today, right? A lot of us we have a lot of Western influence in our viewpoints, right? But, and for me, what's fascinating is that you have this concept of pyramids and, you know, and religion and astronomy in many different cultures, right? That didn't have contact with each other, that were, you know, so spread out geographically and chronologically. Like you have you have pyramids in Egypt, right? You have this similar structures in China, right? Which were, you know, you compare them and they're, right, really considered really great, huge civilizations. So, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of research to be done there, right? With the significance of these structures in these civilizations.
And Patty, it looks like that's the last question we can take is Patty's as what did they have for roofs on the homes in Chichen Itza?
What was that?
What did they have for roofs on the homes in Chichen Itza?
In Chichen Itza, I'm not
Mhm.
sure what they had in Chichen Itza. Is Maggie still on? I know Maggie might have some.
I think that question came from I don't know the name, but they were asking about which pyramid has the serpent going down the pyramid, and
Yeah.
me and this other, I didn't see the gentleman's name, said no, it's not in Teotihuacan. It's in another location called Chichen Itza. So Chichen Itza is a separate pyramid, so there's no type of shelter, which is one of the wonders of the world on this side of the world. Thanks, Lori.
Yeah, thanks. I knew Maggie would. Maggie's a world traveler in Mesoamerica. No, but yeah, the one where it's during the equinox, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, during the summer equinox, isn't it? Or right? Is it?
Yes, I believe so. Yes. I think when the sun I believe when you see it when the sun rises and sets.
Okay.
During the equinox.
Yeah. So if you look that up also for future research, look up the Chichen Itza structure and how during sunrise and sunset during the summer equinox, you can see the shadow. It looks like a snake descending the steps. That's another wonder that, right? It's like, how did they create that with that in mind, right? The sounds, right, of the birds, right, and the visuals of the snake, right? So obviously they were very, very advanced in their understanding of how the world works, right?
That's fascinating.
It is fascinating. It's frustrating. I can see how so many people are frustrated because we want to know, right? But then unfortunately, right, we only have so much to work with to learn more.
All right, it looks like the rest of them are comments, and I just want to thank you so much for doing this, and thank you all so much for attending. I'm sure that we're kind of left in awe and in shock, and we want to learn so much more. So thank you so much for attending, and I hope to see you all in our other International Education Week events.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me.